Hello and welcome to the Football Hipsters English Breakfast. It's a Sunday evening / Monday morning once again, so it's time for us to dissect the weekend's events in the UK, or England specifically. My name is Kris, I am your host, and I'm joined as usual by Ross this evening. Good evening, Ross.
Hello, hello.
And as a late substitute for a poorly Danny, but I wanted him on again anyway because I think these two will mesh quite well. It's the return of Simon Collins. Evening, Simon.
Hi, Kris. You alright?
I'm good, my friend. I'm good. Thank you for stepping in.
No problem.
We've got plenty to discuss this evening, gentlemen, and a couple of really good questions from our listeners as well. So we will jump straight in. We couldn't really start anywhere else but Manchester City, could we? And indeed Leicester City. That was the game at the Etihad on Saturday lunchtime. Let's get your thoughts, Simon. First of all, as a man who's been in the company of Claudio Ranieri on quite a number of occasions recently, do you think this result will have been not surprising to him, but do you think even he might have gone, this is a title challenge all of a sudden for definite now?
I mean, I don't know. It's very difficult with Leicester because I was up there in the week on Thursday as he was doing his pre-match press conference. And me personally, I was adamant that Leicester were going to win this game. I felt so confident just because of Dimichelis and Otamendi at the back against the likes of Vardy and Mahrez. And Ranieri himself is playing the media very well. You know, he's very coy about title race, says one game at a time. And when he's pushed about, you know, what are you actually saying to the players in the dressing room? Do they talk about it? You know, he says, you know, I'm not going to tell you what I say to them. And I've got a feeling that behind closed doors, he's very much saying to them, look, this is our chance and we've got to seize it and go for it. And fair play to them. They're doing exactly that at the moment. You can't argue against it. I mean, I thought they were superb against Manchester City. I mean, that second goal by Mahrez was just amazing. And the whole work rate was typified by the likes of Drinkwater and Kante. And I think they deserve to win that. And I think the squad is now starting to believe that this is a title race. And with a man like Ranieri, I know this, when he came in, he was favourite to be sacked. But you look at his CV, and he's managed probably the 5 biggest teams in Italy. He's managed Valencia, Atletico Madrid, Chelsea. I think with him at the helm, you know, 13 games to go, they're rightfully probably with the bookmakers and most pundits, they're probably favourites.
I think it's very well put, and I totally agree with you on the sort of the Ranieri one face to the press, maybe one other face to the players. I think that's very much what I think as well. What did you make of the game as a whole, Ross? Was this Simon's just talked about how Leicester were perfectly set up to do what they did, but to go there and basically play City off their own pad. I mean, could you have predicted that? And what did you think of the overall game itself?
When I saw the lineups, I thought that Leicester were probably going to win it. I didn't think they would win 3-1. I think scoreline might have caught people off guard. But the thing I would stress to, especially fans of teams that are in the title race, is that 2 of those goals were set pieces. And, you know, League 2 teams can beat Man City if they can't defend set pieces. I'm not trying to diminish how well Leicester played that game, because they did play brilliantly all game. But 2 of those goals were set pieces, and that's a big point to make as far as I'm concerned. But yes, they turned up with the perfect game plan, and Vardy against that back line, as we were just saying, is a recipe for disaster for Man City. It's just a shame that Man City didn't turn up and make it a bit more of a competition for me. Yeah,
I agree with that, and beautifully segued. So I just want to come back to you on this one as well. With the performance of Man City, I mean, there were too many passengers defensively. They looked poor. I know a lot of people were very quick to jump on the sort of the bandwagon of Pellegrini, the week of the announcement, blah blah blah. I don't think it was that. It just, to me, looks like City just look out of sorts. That they didn't seem to be up for it. They didn't seem to have the right mentality. And as good as Leicester were, do you think that there has to be a large amount of this put down to how poor City were on the day?
Yeah, I mean, they were very bad, and they've been very poor against the top teams this season. Actually, you know, if you think back to the games they played, obviously they lost to Arsenal, they lost 4-1 to Tottenham. Against the big sides this season, they haven't really turned up at all. And perhaps it's an issue for Pellegrini to address, whether it was the early kickoff. I know teams like Arsenal, usually those Saturday 12:45s, some players don't particularly like them. And like you said, they just weren't really at it at all. And against a team like Leicester, if you're not at it from the off and you don't fully go to it and go for it from the off, then you will get caught out. And it seems to be the same thing we say every sort of week with Manchester City. You know, no Vincent Kompany. They look bad at the back. And I know perhaps Kompany isn't the player he was physically and athletically, but in terms of his leadership and organisation, he controls that back four. And when he's not there, they seem a bit lost. So I don't think the announcement had anything to do with it. I think Pellegrini was right to brush that off. I mean, these guys are professionals. Everyone basically knew that Pellegrini was on his way out anyway. The likes of Sterling, when he moved there in the summer, would have known that. So I don't think that had an effect at all. I think, like you say, they just didn't really turn up on the day, and it cost them.
And Arsenal last week were after their game of I can't remember who it was against now. Christ, Southampton in midweek. How could I forget, Ross? After the game in midweek, Arsenal were fourth. It was crisis. Simon, do you think that Man City fans will react the same way? I mean, they now sit fourth. It's almost role reversals in terms of the two clubs after today's results. Do you think the Man City fans will be sort of having that? Are we going to blow it again type of attitude, or do you think that they still believe that they've got enough to put a run together and take this title?
I mean, it's difficult. I know a few friends of mine who are Manchester City fans, and a couple of them who went to the game, and they weren't as too downbeat as I thought they would be. I think they sort of almost chalked it off and said, we didn't play very well at all, and they thought they had created a few chances themselves actually, and for them, certainly from the consensus they get, is the belief that if Sergio Aguero stays fit till the end of the season, then they'll have a very, very good chance of winning the league, simply because when he's on form, he's the best striker in the league. And you've got to agree with that. 13 games to go is still a very, very long way, I think. And for Leicester, certainly coming to them, it's more of a case of saying, right, let's try and be ahead after we played 30 games. Let's try and be ahead after we played 34 and try and break it down, because 13 games, there's still a long way to go. And I think City fans see that they're by no means out of the title race.
Yeah, it's very easy to forget it's still the 7th of February, and there's plenty of twists to come, one suspects. Ross, let's move on to the Saturday games then, and we'll keep it at the top end of the table and quote unquote the title race. Spurs entertained Watford at White Hart Lane. It wasn't the greatest of spectacles from what I'm led to believe, but Tottenham ground out a win once again. Now, it's no secret that we do have quite a heavy Arsenal fan base due to other projects that I might be involved with. But you made a comment a few weeks ago about Pochettino, obviously former Southampton boss, his players having a bit of a struggle around about this time of the season. Do you think that a 1-0 victory over Watford in a game they largely laboured in, do you think this is the sort of first sign that maybe games are starting to catch up with them?
It's very possible. I think the quote I used was Jack Hawke saying, "You need two hearts to play for Pochettino," and I remember saying that the second one usually gives out around now. I would say that Watford is a very sticky tie anyway. I know they've not been playing the best lately, but they're still a very good defensive unit, as they showed against Chelsea in midweek as well. So perhaps it was just a very good, rigid Watford side, slowing them down a bit. But certainly the amount of rotation, I didn't expect so many fullback rotations in that game. There were other players, I think, in midfield as well that they swapped from the previous game. So perhaps it is a sign that things are starting to slow down. But the thing about the Tottenham setup is they do have the strength in depth to cover it. And I think you saw that in midweek on the weekend with Trippier getting the goal, is they can change things around and try and eke it out like Pochettino couldn't really do at Southampton. But definitely that it could be an indicator that things are starting to slow down for Tottenham.
And here's a loaded question for you. As a sort of a person that knows a bit about Pochettino, his results against the big sides as opposed to the sort of lesser sides, can you give our listeners some insight how they were for Southampton last year? Just sort of a few that you can pick out, because Spurs' next run of games is considerably more straightforward looking than particularly Arsenal's and Manchester City. So do you think that they'll take their eye off the ball because of the opposition not being quite as high level?
It's quite a possibility, because the results that I think of when we had Pochettino in charge, the ones that I remember that we should have won are generally the ones that we drew or lost. The big teams, I remember beating Man City 3-1 at home at St Mary's. We did have an own goal go in our favour in that game, but we still beat them 3-1. We beat Chelsea as well. I know one of those was a Ricky Lambert free kick, and like I mentioned earlier with set pieces, they can beat any team. But I remember beating them. We got a 1-0 away at Liverpool as well. I mean, generally speaking, they do turn up against the big teams because the big teams can't seem to handle the pressing game, or at least Pochettino's version of it. But it's normally the lesser teams that will just keep fighting and keep pushing and keep tracking you back as much as Tottenham will, that they struggle against. So you might look at Tottenham's run in and say they've got the easier one, but you just never know, with, especially, like I say earlier, with fatigue factor to play into this as well. There's plenty of points there that Tottenham could end up dropping.
Yeah, will be very interesting next month or so. And Simon, what do you make of Watford? I mean, obviously they've had I think it's fair to say, a pretty decent season, given the fact that they've come up from the Championship. They've got this complicated ownership structure with the two other clubs involved and the Pozzos, but they've shipped players in, they've shipped players out, they've rotated the side. Flores seems to have got them comfortably in sort of safety zone. What's their ambitions as far as a club goes, particularly looking ahead to next season if they do indeed stay up?
I mean, I think it's certainly this season the ambition was to stay up, and bringing Flores in, he had a very, very difficult task, and certainly at the start of the season when there was a bit of interest in Watford and going down there, you could sense obviously his involvement in the transfers is near enough zero, to be honest. I mean, he doesn't really have a say in the players. It's done all above his head, who comes in, who comes out, and the number of players they brought in different nationalities, it's amazing. He's knitted them all together, and I think if Leicester weren't doing so well under Ranieri, I think Flores would be talked about a lot more in how good a job he's doing there. But as you say, they've been very, very solid this season. I was at the Chelsea game on Wednesday night, and it was typical from them. They're very hard to beat if you can't break them down, and then they'll hit you on the counter-attack with Deeney and Ighalo, and I think they missed Deeney against Tottenham, obviously, but when they go forward for next season, I think the ambition will still be the same, and to solidify themselves as a Premier League team before they really try and push on into Europe or anything like that. But with the basis that the Pozzos have got, the real dilemma for them is do they make Watford the number one team in their empire, so to speak? Obviously, they've got Granada and Udinese. Udinese is the main team at the moment, but if Watford start becoming a big Premier League team with the money involved in that, do they shift all their attention onto Watford and start moving players from Udinese over to there? I think that'll be the question for them. And if they do that, then Watford have got the capability to push up into a top half team.
I have a sneaky feeling Watford might become the number one club next year, because Udinese are behind at least, I would say, 8 clubs in Italy. I'm sure John would back me up on that, and it's going to be tough for them to win anything in Italy, whereas Watford, you could see them maybe go on a cup run, for example, so we shall see. I want a one-word answer from you both very quickly before we leave this game behind. Tottenham title contenders, yes or no, Simon?
100% title contenders, yeah.
And Ross?
Yep, I'm exact same opinion.
Interesting. I'll keep my opinions to myself. Moving on then, let's go down the bottom end and have a little dabble at what's going on down there. Simon, I'm going to come to you first on Aston Villa and Norwich. Now, again, Villa, I think it's a club you've had a bit of dealings with as far as in the press rooms and whatnot there. Do you get the impression that what Remy Gard is trying to do is slowly taking shape? I mean, he's working with some pretty average players and some players that may prove to be very talented. Have they got any hope? I mean, they won 2-0 yesterday, but let's be honest, Norwich, not that great, are they?
Yeah, I mean, I was at the game yesterday, and it was not the greatest advert for the Premier League, and I was quite surprised that it featured that high up on Match of the Day, but I guess an Aston Villa win is a rarity. And certainly Norwich were appalling. I mean, I think that's 19 goals in 6 games they conceded, but there were some green shoots from Villa and Remy Gard. You could see what he was trying to do and building it from the back and playing it out and getting it out wide. And the midfielders of Idrissa Gana, Ashley Westwood, Carlos Gil, they certainly seem to be knitting together. And I think the issue for Gard is he couldn't get a single player in January, and I think that was really frustrating for him, because he's basically inherited this squad. He hasn't been able to make any changes on it, and it's a squad that's probably not good enough for the Premier League. They finished 17th last year, and they lost their 2 best players in Benteke and Delph. So I don't know where anyone expected them to be anywhere than where they are now. But whether they can stay up, they're 1 point worse off than Leicester were at this point. But if you compare their run into what Leicester's was, I think people forget Leicester did always have quite a nice run in, whereas Villa's run in, if you look at those fixtures, it's pretty horrible reading. And I think they've left it a little bit too much. But I hope they do stick with Garden. I think they will if they go down. I think the more the case is whether he sticks around and thinks, whether I want to really rebuild this and try and bring this club back up. So, but I think for them, there's definitely positives to take, and the football's better to watch than it was under Sherwood, I'd say.
Yeah, I think there's certainly an example of two clubs moving in very different directions. Villa are slightly improving. Norwich, to me, seem to be getting worse, if anything, which is a real worry for their manager, Alex Neil, who's, is he 34, I think I'm right in saying? He's very young, isn't he? So it's risky times for Norwich. Ross, what did you make of the situation with Swansea? Now, they've brought in a lot of players in the January window, and obviously a new manager, more important than anything, in Francesco Guidolin. What do you make of them? They were 1-0 up against Palace yesterday, succumbed to an equaliser, and it ended 1-1. But there's been signs that they're kind of on the up. Do you think they'll be all right staying up, wise?
I think they've got a better chance now than they did with Alan Curtis was his name? Always forget his name.
Yeah.
I think they've got a much better chance now they've got an actual manager in. I tipped them to go down a few weeks ago when they appeared to be keeping with Alan Curtis and not hiring a new manager. Now they've got someone in, I think they've got a much better chance. I think they're ruining that 1-1 with Palace yesterday, because on the form that Palace were in going into that game, they would have looked at that and said, this is one we really need to be taking 3 points from. I'm not sure about Paloschi yet. I know we've got some high reviews amongst the football hipsters, but I haven't seen too much of him just yet to believe that he's going to be scoring the goals that would definitely keep them up. But I think they're going in the right direction at the very least. But that draw against Palace would, if I was a Swansea fan anyway, that would sting.
Yeah, I do think Paloschi will do all right. I'm going to put my head on the block there, but I do think he'll do okay. And from the opposite perspective, so what about Palace? I mean, they've been a club that has been playing some good stuff. They were quite easy on the eye. A lot of supporters' favourite second team earlier on in the season, but they've had an alarming turn of form in the past sort of 5-6 weeks. Do you think that everything's right there? Do you think bringing in sort of Adebayor is going to be enough to turn them around and finish mid-table?
I think it's just classic Alan Pardew, really. I mean, if you look at his Newcastle days, this sort of fluctuation in peaks and troughs and results, and they'd go on a sort of 6-game winning streak and then they'd go and lose 7 in a row. It seems to be the way his management sort of works, that he goes on these sort of winless runs and then they'll go on an unbeaten run. So I don't think there's anything untoward going on at the club in terms of, chemistry and the atmosphere at the place. I think it's just they are on a bad run, and you get that with Pardew in charge. So for them, perhaps, that's a good point for them to build on, and they are still a good side. And with Adebayor, everyone knows if you can get him fit and in good shape, he'll get you goals. And I mean, that's desperately what they need. I don't think they've scored a goal from open play from one of their strikers this season. I think that was a stat I saw, which is pretty worrying stuff, to be honest. And that's been the problem all season. They've got enough of these Balassis, Punch and Zaha type players, but in terms of an out-and-out centre forward, unless Adebayor starts firing, they are limited there.
Yeah, so definitely, as you say, definitely need to start getting goals from the further up the end of the pitch rather than just the creative wingers. And Ross, your thoughts? Do you echo what Simon says there about Pardew being a man who would be all too familiar with his ways?
Yeah. Whenever I talk about Pardew, I have to make the point that I don't know what he writes in that book, because it never seems to change the game. With us, he played a flat 4-4-2 for most of it, and it did the job, but it wasn't all that inspiring. I think he's helped at Crystal Palace by the fact that the front four is so quick and entertaining to watch. But they always go through these spells with Pardew. He did with us, and that's ultimately what got him the sack, was that there was no consistency. You could get on a really good run of results, and he'd look like the best manager, and then suddenly it would turn, and then you'd start questioning what he's doing there or why you brought him in over someone else. So, yeah, I think some of the calls for him to be England manager at the start of this season, when Palace were doing really well, were a bit premature, because he goes through these spells and he'll get them out of it. But he's not the most inspiring manager for me.
No, it does have the air of a manager who kind of drops in and out of form, as you say, and seems to know all the right things to say in the media, but you're not always convinced that you believe what he actually says. We shall see.
I think one of the best things Pardew does do is he plays the players in the right positions and gives them the reason to go out and play as they would. Because when he was here at Southampton, we had Lambert and Lallana essentially as our front two, and they were absolutely fantastic. He goes to Crystal Palace, the front three play as they really should. I mean, Puncheon and Zaha mainly just run, whip in some nice crosses, cut inside, try and take a shot. It's just what they do. So he's given them the freedom to do it, and 9 times out of 10 it seemed to work for him this season. But tactically, I'm not sure he's got it. I think he just puts them out, organises them, and then says, do what you do best. But aside from that, I'm not sure he's got much in his locker.
Interesting. And I always get the impression, I don't know whether it's just me, but I always get the feeling he's going to whip out his coat and go, anyone want to buy a watch, with a smile. He does seem a little bit Harry Redknapp light, doesn't he, in that department? Simon, what do you make of the Newcastle-West Brom game? Newcastle getting the victory by 1-0. Surprising that it was only one goal, because by and large they kind of took the game to West Brom and dominated for long periods. I want to ask you really on both sides. Let's start with West Brom, though. This is a side that employed Tony Pulis to do a job in the first season, keep them up. He did that. But their fans are not happy, are they? And they look to me like a side that they're not convincing. And they do appear to be a side that I think could slide into this relegation mess. What do you make of both sides?
Yeah, I mean, with West Brom, I've seen him play a few times this season, and you sort of watch them play and you wonder why they're not in more of a relegation fight, because they don't seem to play that good football. But with Pulis, they get a lot of results, and I think he described it as the worst away performance he's seen since he's taken over at the club. And they have been good away from home this season, to be fair. They got a result at Chelsea, they've been to other places, and Liverpool and got a result. So it seems to be that he just finds a way. But in terms of the actual quality of football, I think West Brom fans are a little disappointed, because under Steve Clarke they did play some attractive stuff. Roy Hodgson certainly had some success there, and it just feels for them, it was great getting Pulis in. He kept them up. But in terms of the actual football and the way it's played, you look over at other teams in the league, say like for Newcastle now, seem to be turning a corner. I think they're a bit disappointed, West Brom fans. But for Newcastle, I mean, they did play very well, and the money they've spent in January looks to be well spent. I think with Shelvey in that midfield, they look a lot more creative. And if you can get those players like Wijnaldum and Townsend going beyond the likes of Mitrovic up front, I think they'll be fine. And it's always been a bit of a weird one for Newcastle this season. You sort of forget they're in a relegation fight when you look at the players. But if they play like they did on Saturday, I think they'll be fine. I think more than enough qualities to get out of that situation. Yeah,
the squad, as you say, on paper, it looks to be a mid-table side at worst, and yet they continue to languish down the bottom end. Another game I want to focus on, I want to get both your thoughts on this, the Sunderland and Liverpool game. Now, Sunderland clawing back this game from seemingly just beyond any hope at 2-0 down, and two late goals got them the point at Anfield, Adam Johnson and Jermaine Defoe in the last minute. I want to get both your thoughts on the two incidents that kind of highlighted in this game. So first of all, you had the Liverpool sort of ticket protest or walkout, whichever way you want to call it, and then of course you had Sunderland coming back after all these fans had disappeared, and somewhat of a kind of a weird link between the two. I want to ask first of all, Ross, what do you make of the situation ticket wise? What do you make of Liverpool, and is this a sort of point that could keep Sunderland up? I appreciate that's three things in one there, but
I'll do my best. The ticket prices, I think, is a joke. I think we all know the quote from the Bayern Munich chairman, who pointed out the huge gulf in prices when it comes to the Bundesliga and the Premier League. It is ridiculous to put the prices up even further, especially because everyone knows the amount of money that's coming in next season with the TV deal. So I imagine for Liverpool fans, it's a bit of a slap in the face. Thankfully, most other clubs have had the sense to not announce anything mid-season about ticket prices. Or if they have, they've either stayed the same or gone up very, very, very marginally. So I don't think that's helped the mood among the fans at the very least, because they're already having a rough season, and to now be told it's going to get more expensive next season is surely not going to be. It's surely not going to sit well with them. As for the point, I think it's a much bigger point for Sunderland than Liverpool. Clearly, could have been all three for Liverpool, perhaps if even Klopp had just been able to be there on the day. I'm not sure the walkout had that much of an impact. I'd like to think not anyway. As professional footballers, you shouldn't be too concerned about fans leaving whenever they want to, especially when you're 2-0 up. I mean, you can't get lax when you're 2-0 up against a team that's trying to fight for every ball because they need the points more than you do. And the point for Sunderland, I think it's colossal, realistically, in the grand scheme of things, because there are other teams down the bottom that won't be getting points out of Liverpool. So I think that's a big point for them.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you there. At any point away from home at this stage of the season is huge, especially at one of the quote-unquote bigger clubs. Simon, what do you make of particularly the ticket issue? You obviously, as you said, in your line of work, you come into contact with a lot of people that I'm sure have differing opinions on this from a business or football standpoint. And I want to get your thoughts. Have any of the managers said anything to you in presses that you've heard about, that when they've been asked the question, how do they feel about it? Or do they sort of protect their club, or are they very much on the side of the fans?
I mean, it's difficult because it's not really, a question for the manager to answer, simply because they don't have a large say in it. And Wenger did get asked it on Friday at his press conference, and more speaking in a broader terms, Wenger simply said, with the new money that comes in, I think you'll see the money spent on transfers, which I think is probably the right, rather than ticket prices. I think that's where the money will go. I think clubs will look to invest more in players. We've obviously seen it already with clubs preempting that cash windfall coming in, and they're spending big on signing. So I think that's where the money will go. As for the issue of tickets itself, you can see it from both sides, from a business side, from a club. If you run a business and someone's willing to pay a good amount of money for your product, you obviously want to sell it at that price and make the most money. But from a supporter's viewpoint, you can see it because the amount of money from the TV deals means the ticket prices. I mean, they could really be £20, you think, for every club. Just say like every game's £20, and it would make such a good gesture, or to even freeze prices for the next season with the new cash money coming in. I know Alan Shearer on Match of the Day was saying that it makes up such a small percentage of clubs' revenue that if they could just keep it, a low amount, it'd be great. But I don't think you will see that. I think ticket prices will keep going up simply because people will pay them. So that's the way it is, I think, unfortunately. And I don't think it will change even with this new TV deal.
No, I don't either. I think it's one of those that the protest is one thing, and yes, it will hurt the commercial side of things for clubs, but I don't know. I just worry for the fans. I think it's fast becoming a business, and sadly, it seems to be that for every group of fans that refuse to pay it, there's another 50,000-60,000 fans that will step in and pay the prices. So it's a vicious circle, and some very strong opinions on Radio 5 606 programme that's probably worth listening to if you want more on that from last night. So a little plug for that small organisation, the BBC there. Ross, I was going to say Simon, your Saints. Ross, your Saints is what I meant to say. Obviously, you have the opportunity whenever you're on the pod to have a little wax lyrical about your boys in red and white.
If applicable.
If applicable, absolutely. I could never get used to them playing in all red. I remember that season. It just didn't look right.
Neither did we, don't worry.
Thankfully, back in stripes. There's a 1-0 victory over West Ham in the late game yesterday. Convincing, not convincing, and do you want to just give us a little line about the winning goal scorer?
Oh, God. Well, as for the game, it was not the best game you'll ever see. Offensively, we were not at our best. But thankfully, we've got Forster back in goal, and the back line is looking a lot stronger now. I think I sent a tweet out after, actually, I think it might have even been after the Arsenal game now, where I said that those are the kinds of games we were losing in December when Stekelenburg was in goal, because we just didn't have that confidence in the back line. Thankfully, this time we had a decent back five with the keeper, and we were able to keep the clean sheet. That was the main thing. West Ham, for all the pressing they did, especially after we went down to 10, they never really threatened. You never really felt like there was any clear-cut chances for them. And realistically speaking, in the second half, the two best chances came to Southampton with Shane Long and Charlie Austin. So it was comfortable defensively, I would say. But on another day, if Yoshida doesn't pop up when he does for that goal, then it's a bit of a worrying 0-0 for me. As for Yoshida, as a Southampton fan that has a large Southampton following on my Twitter feed, normally when I see the teams come out, I post a little tweet about it and say, oh, well, that's good, that's bad, whatever. Every time I see Yoshida's name on that team sheet, I worry, because perennially he costs us goals or puts us in bad situations and just doesn't convince me. I said something along the lines of, hopefully in the back five, then mistakes will be minimalised. And then obviously he pops up with the goal. So suddenly my timeline is filled with, oh, well, you couldn't have possibly been doubting Yoshida. He's just proved you wrong. And what a good player he is. Why aren't you supporting the players? I would just say that I think I've said in this pod before that I'm a defensive-minded football fan. And for me, defenders are paid to defend. I don't mind if they pop up with a goal. That's brilliant. And especially since it was the winning goal, fantastic. But I judge Yoshida primarily on how he does defending. And even in that game against West Ham, he almost scored an own goal. He almost conceded a penalty, which would have been a penalty on another day. Ridiculously pulling Payet's shirt a couple of inches outside of the penalty area. More than enough times where he's under-hitting back passes, not getting close enough to his man. For me, he's not Premier League quality. But of course he scores, and that's the power of the goal. Suddenly everyone forgets about it. The way I'd compare this for football fans that don't quite get where I'm coming from, it's like if Dejan Lovren scored the winner for Liverpool in a game, and suddenly everyone said, oh, what a great player he is. Well, no, he's not. And he's not for Liverpool. He's made God knows how many mistakes. We've got so many vines of him falling over and doing tricks he can't possibly do. One goal doesn't change that. So I love Yoshida. He plays for the shirt, and he's one of the most passionate players we've got. But for me, that goal doesn't fix all the problems he's caused us over the past 3 years.
Fair. I like it. Very honest. I like that approach. And here's another loaded question for you. I seem to give you one every week. Where we are right now, so early February, where do you see the club heading into March? I mean, do you think that you should be pushing on as you have been the last few weeks and things have improved, or do you see it as a bit of a false dawn? Which kind of camp are you in?
It's tricky because the Premier League this year has been such that you can go on a run of 5 wins and then suddenly go on a run of 5 losses, as we've already experienced ourselves in December. Palace and Stoke are going on it now. So I'd like to think that we'll keep it together. I mean, we've got Swansea next week, which I'd like to think will be a win, or at the very least a draw, because I know they're going to be fighting for points. If I had to say, I would suggest that we will be keeping it a bit steadier now, especially with Forster back in goal, and we'll probably end up about where we are now in the table. But it's so easy to just flip the switch and suddenly start sliding again. So it's going to be a tricky end to the season.
Yeah, if you could arrange it so that Fraser Forster could possibly slide down the stairs before you come to the Emirates next year, that would be lovely. Thanks.
Oh.
Man was just outrageously good the other night.
Yes,
Still not quite over that. Honestly, terrible. Simon, just the one more game to cover on the Saturday, and that was Everton, who we will come on to a little bit later on. We had an excellent question on them. They went away at Stoke by 3-0. A Stoke side that, I don't know if you agree, but seemed to me to have just drifted off the boil since their Carling Cup exit at Liverpool. They seem to have just kind of slid away a little bit. Is this a sign that Everton are onto a good thing? They've dropped Tim Howard, they've dropped John Stones has been out injured, I think I'm right in saying. They look a bit more solid, or is that all just kind of coincidence and they've just always been quite good going forward?
I mean, I think if we're talking about Leicester being the biggest overachievers, I think Everton have been the biggest underachievers when you look at that squad and the likes of Deulofeu, Barkley, Lukaku and Lennon, who's been very impressive in recent weeks, and they have looked good going forward, and now they've seemingly shored it up at the back. You know, that's 2-3-0 wins on the bounce. Maybe they have turned a corner and they can finish the season strongly, because they should really be a top 7 team. And if they can kick on and Martinez can rectify the situation, then I think the fans will just about be appeased. I still think it'll be difficult in the summer to keep hold of those players without any European football. And as for Stoke, well, that Capital One Cup semi-final defeat to Liverpool, which they should have won, really. I mean, they were the better side, I think, over the 2 legs probably, and perhaps that is still affecting them. But I think the biggest loss is Ryan Shawcross, and when he's not in that defence, they really don't look at it, and they are missing him severely. And for Mark Hughes, I think it would just be to try and arrest the slide and not waste the good work they've done this season, because they have been good, and they've changed the conception of what Stoke was. They're no longer a long ball team with the likes of Shaqiri and Afellay. So I think for them, it's just a case of trying to get back to where they were earlier on in the season and still finish strongly, because there is enough talent in that squad easily to finish in the top half.
Yeah, I agree with that. Certainly enough good players. I think I'm right in saying there was talk that Arnautovic has got a buyout clause of 12 million. Is it this summer?
Yeah, it seems to be that. Well, Mark Hughes denies it, and the press reporters. So I imagine it's one of those clauses which is activated by certain sort of, perhaps it's only available in the month of, July and it finishes in August, or dependent on Stoke not finishing in Europe. So I think certainly for Arnautovic, he's an ambitious player, as we all know, and he does very highly rate himself. And I think if he was offered, a move, and I think clubs are interested, then he could be one to leave. But whether that buyout clause does exist, I think it'd be one of those which is difficult to see the light of day anyway. But apparently, I think it's only around about 12.5 million. So someone would be interested in that, you'd think. Maybe it's only for sort of a top 4 team, top 6 team, or something like that, because otherwise that seems like a very low amount for Stoke to agree on anyway.
Yeah. With all this money coming in, of course, teams will be ready to take their punt on the transfer market. So we shall see in the summer.
Would anyone suggest that Arnautovic has calmed down since he's come to Stoke? Because when he signed for Stoke, all I heard was he's got this bad boy reputation, and I've not seen much of it because I didn't hear of it before he came to England. He didn't do it like an Osvaldo when he came to Southampton. He had a bad boy reputation and then showed it. Has Arnautovic calmed down, or have I just missed something?
I've never really. I mean, Kris probably knows him more from his time in abroad, but from what I've seen in England, I agree with you. I mean, also I've never really seen him showing his ill temper or anything like that. I mean, when he first came to Stoke, there was a bit. He had that sort of attitude and that swagger, but he wasn't really delivering. But you can't argue now with his performances whether it was an attitude problem or getting sent off, or what. Kris can probably enlighten us on that. But I'd never really seen him before he came here. But certainly from what he's seen, he looks like a good athlete. And I'm trying to think of the game it was. I think it might have been potentially against Spurs or something like that, where he knocked it past the fullback and he out-sprinted. I think it might be Danny Rose or something like that. And everyone sort of was like, oh, he's actually quick. And when he wants to, he can, on his day, I mean, that goal against Man United typified. He's got bags of talent, but perhaps it's been an attitude issue, which Kris can explain.
Yeah, I mean, he's always had the talent. I think that was abundantly clear from when he broke through at 20 in the Dutch league, and then he obviously went to Inter for a season and was bombed out pretty quickly. And that's where I think a lot of the attitude came from. In that there were sort of suspicions that thought he was a bit better than he was, and there was the talk about the tattoo that he got about Inter's. Champions League winning team, and he wasn't in the squad and still got the tattoo with the date on, and that sort of says it all. And he was a little bit like that. I think he's 26 now. I think he has definitely matured. Little known fact is he's actually only ever had 2 career red cards, and one of those was for 2 bookings. So he's not particularly a dirty player. I think he's one of those players that just stays just the right side of the law. He's been booked 23 times in his career, which again is not a huge amount if you consider the amount of seasons he's had. But the talent's there. The hair is awful. That definitely does need to go. But no, I think that the talent is definitely there, and maybe, just maybe, you're seeing it under a manager like Mark Hughes, who wasn't shy himself, let's be fair, to a little bit of a naughty tackle here and there and a bit of a mouthful here and there. So maybe Sparky's got hold of him and said, look, I know all about what you are, but you need to focus on your football.
I mean, Mourinho described him as a fantastic player, but with the attitude of a child, so that sort of summed it up.
Yes. Coming from Mourinho, that's...
but if you think that, I mean, Stoke bought him for £2 million, so if you think of all the money that's spent, £2 million, not a bad little gamble from their point of view.
No, not at all. And yeah, absolutely. And a long list of players that have been signed in this for this season that have come up trumps from very, very cheap prices. Sorry, from previous seasons, I should say. He was signed 3 years ago, but has come to the fore this season. Let's move on to Sunday's games then, and we'll start with Bournemouth and Arsenal. I always like to give Ross the first shout on Arsenal, so I'm not too biased. So, Ross, what did you make of the performance? Arsenal fans on social media, here we go, but they're very split on the performance. Some say that it should have been more ruthless and that they should have put the game to bed earlier. Others say quite happy, clean sheet, back to winning ways. Performance was pretty decent overall. Which side of the camp do you sit in, and where do you see Arsenal's title challenge?
You can't be happy, can you? It's a 2-0 win against Bournemouth after a bad run, and there are still Arsenal fans complaining it should have been more. No, I thought that was a very, very professional kind of result. I mean, like I just said, they've been on a poor run, especially the backlash that I saw on social media during the week when we drew with you. I think 2-0 against a team that were actually doing quite well going into that and really could have caused you more problems than they did. You've got to be happy with that, surely. I think that's a big, big 3 points because Bournemouth, as much as I was sure that Arsenal would beat Bournemouth this weekend, that was still banana skin. Bournemouth could very easily have turned up and given you a much better game than you got. Could have got at least one past you, and we all know that goals change games. So no, I'd be thrilled if I was an Arsenal fan with 2-0. That was a tricky tie. You got through it comfortably. And Oxlade-Chamberlain obviously got a goal, which is his first in God knows how many months. So yeah, I'd be happy with a good day's work if it was me.
Yeah, there was a stat floating around that it was Ox's first goal away from home in God knows how many years or something since he was at Saints, I believe, because he got the one at 5 years, crikey. He got the goal at Newcastle, but that was given as an own goal, I believe, so never counted. But Simon, what did you make of it then? I mean, would we be saying, for example, that Arsenal got away and won this game 2-0? If Arsenal was still top of the league and were sort of comfortably at the top of the table as they were 4 or 5 weeks ago, surely we'd be saying this was a performance of potential champions. And yet, because of the last couple of games, people are still doubting it and saying, well, it was a must-win game. So how did you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just one of those games that for Arsenal, they just had to win it by hook or by crook. And Bournemouth, they're playing very well at the moment. I think they had 7 points from their last 9 coming into this. Afobe was in the goals. And to go there and get a clean sheet and win 2-0, everyone comes through unscathed. I don't think Arsenal fans can really have any complaints about that. Certainly at this point of the season, when the result was more important than the performance there for Arsenal. Because if they'd played brilliantly like fans had wanted and drawn 3-3 in a thriller, then fans would have been livid. So I think for Wenger, it was all about getting the result. They got the 2 goals. Cech was superb in goal as always. Gabriel and Koscielny looked good at the back, and I thought Monreal at left back was superb again. Very good contender for the match. I know Ramsey got it, but I thought Monreal was brilliant. So for Arsenal, I think, there shouldn't be any complaints about the performance and just take it as 3 points. And it means, they move above City and level on points with Spurs. So should be happy days, I think, for Arsenal fans after that.
Yep, I'm with you. I'm totally with you. Before we leave the title race behind and finish up with our final game of the weekend, another one-team answer from you all. We're going to do this every week, as we always do, but who is currently winning the title, in your opinion, Ross?
Arsenal, but that changes if Leicester beat Arsenal next week.
We'll cover that next week, you cheat. And, Simon?
See, I've said City since day one are going to win the league, but who's going to win it at the moment? If I had a tenner and I was going to go put a bet on Leicester, I think.
Interesting. Yes, times are turning with people's opinions. Definitely the bookies. Anyway, so watch this space. We will cover the game between Manchester United and Chelsea to round off before we take some questions. It's fair to say, Simon, this game was better than the reverse fixture, although in fairness I've had episodes of diarrhea that were probably better than that fixture, if I'm honest. But today it was a bit more blood and thunder, it was a bit more passion. Very good goal from Jesse Lingard, equalised late on by Diego Costa. But would it be fair to say that the talking point of this game was more about an injury to a player than the game itself?
Yeah, I mean, it was a frustrating game the last time these two sides came together, and I think everyone was expecting, more of the same, and for it to come back like that. And I think Chelsea, improved in the way they did, and to get that goal at the end, they probably deserved it. I think on fair reflection, to get a point out of that, and obviously it was disappointing to see the injury. And I'm just trying to see who was one who went off anyway. Oh, Zuma, of course. Oh God, yeah, no, I just remembered it. I remember seeing the replay of it and wincing, sat watching it in the pub. But I think Zuma, a disappointment like that, because I thought he had a good game, and I think he has been for a 21-year-old. I know Chelsea have been battered this season, and there's very few sort of shining lights, but I think him and John Terry have actually slowly formed a good partnership together. So it was disappointing to see him go off. But for United, I mean, there's a lot of plus points to take out. But I think Borthwick Jackson at left backs, but developing into a very good player, looks good. Lingard, as you say, on that right hand side, great goal. I mean, the turn and volley on the spin was fantastic. And Martial seems to be slowly, developing into the talent that he was hyped at Monaco. And if they can get the best out of Lingard and Martial, then they'll fancy their chances to maybe sneak in the top 4. And for Lingard, I think his incentive will be, the Euros, because I was chatting to other people the other day, and we were trying to do our England team for Euro 2016, and most of it's pretty much in place. You'd probably have Sterling on the left, Rooney in the hole, but that right hand side, Walcott, Oxlade-Chamberlain, it really is open for grabs. And if Lingard, can play like that for 3-4 months, he's got every chance of getting an England team.
Yeah, there's always one that sneaks in, isn't there? Always one under the radar, and he could be that man, particularly with so many wide players out of form or indeed injured, so we shall see. And anyone that hasn't seen that injury to Kurt Zouma, be prepared. It's quite graphic, his knee going underneath him as he landed from an aerial challenge. So it looks like a lengthy spell on the sidelines for probably one of the better and more talented young defenders in Europe. So sad times for him, certainly. Ross, I did just want to get your thoughts on something from this game that I noticed. And aside from David De Gea was outstanding for Manchester United, and that got a lot of social media attention. But the other thing that certainly grabbed the attention social media wise from particularly United fans was the disappointment of their signing on the right hand side in Depay. Now, as a Southampton fan, you'll be fairly sort of familiar with a similar type of player in Mane, who some weeks can be fantastic and other weeks you wonder why he's there at all. What do you make of Depay? Do you think it is too early to judge him? Does he still need a bit more time, or should we be putting him in the box marked flop?
Well, I think it's far too soon to say he's been a flop. I would say that he's probably got a big move too soon. I think that's what's probably bogged him down. I don't just say this because Southampton were in for him, and if it wasn't for United going in for him, we would have signed him. But I do think he did make the step up a bit too quickly, because not only is playing in the Premier League very tricky, but playing for Man United is also very tricky. So I think he's just been a victim, realistically, of the position that he's been put in. He does need to do better, of course he does. But yeah, I think it's far too soon to say he's a bad player or that it was a mistake to buy him. He will come good, but it might just take him a little bit more time.
Yeah, I think there's a few United players that, depending on who's managing them next season, will be very interesting to see how many of those are still there, and if they are still there, how quickly they will come on. So we shall keep an eye on that.
One thing I can say with certainty as a Southampton fan is that Schneiderlin should be getting in that team over Fellaini every day of the week.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. And to be completely honest, he hasn't hit his best form either, has he, since he's been at United? So that says a lot about Fellaini more than anything else, I think. So, yeah, fair shout indeed. We will quickly run down the table then before we touch on a couple of things lower down the league. So Leicester extend their lead at the top with that victory over Manchester City to 53 points they are, and that leaves them 5 points clear of Spurs and Arsenal on 48 points in joint second or second and third respectively, whichever you prefer. Manchester City now down to fourth, as we said, on 47 points. Manchester United fifth on 41. West Ham and Southampton make up the top seven, and then you've got Everton and Liverpool 8th and 9th, and then reading up from the bottom you've got Villa 16 points from 25 games, Sunderland just above them on 20 points, Norwich just above them on 23, Newcastle on 24, and then Swansea, Bournemouth and West Brom reading up the table above them, and Chelsea now still remain in 13th. So that's where the table stands. Jamie Vardy is still the top goal scorer with 18 goals this season. Lukaku, with his extra strike this weekend, moves on to 16 goals. Harry Kane, Sergio Aguero and Odion Ighalo make up the top five. And as far as assists, that hasn't really changed much either. Still Mesut Ozil with 16, Riyad Mahrez with 10, Kevin De Bruyne with 9 and Christian Eriksen with 8, joined with Deulofeu and David Silva. So that's where we are as far as that goes. And just out of curiosity, I had a look at the disciplinary table this weekend, and Victor Wanyama is top of the bad boy list with 5 cautions and 3 red cards this season. Just ahead of Alex Tete, who's had 10 bookings this season, and then West Ham's Mark Noble, who has 6 cautions and 1 dismissal. So that's an interesting table. Looking down the list of names, it's quite amusing. You've got the likes of Lucas Leiva, Gareth Barry, Charlie Adam, Nemanja Matic, Jack Colback, some quite familiar names.
Have you said Lee Catamol yet?
Season's gone. No, amazingly, he's not in. I'm sure he's there. He's not in that top. Top 10, 11 list?
That does surprise me.
Saying that, he has had a few injury problems, I think, so he might not have played as many games.
He'll find a way to get booked on the bench.
He does strike you as that kind of player, doesn't he? It's like, I can come on for 5 minutes and still end up with King. So I might just have interest. I might just check, and I'll tell you, he has had 5 cautions this season.
The most surprising stat all season,
18
surely.
games. Isn't it just? Yeah, maybe he's mellowing in his old age. Or maybe not. Right, let's have a quick check on things as far as the Championship go. Now, Ross, next week you're going to bring us up to speed with League 2 and League 1, so we'll save those for next week. But just touching on the Championship, do you want to just give us your sort of highlights of this weekend's
Yeah, I think
results?
there were 2 really standout results that are worth mentioning, which are that Burnley managed to beat Hull, which is a huge result at the top of the Championship because that condenses the race for the top 2 now. That puts Hull on 56, Middlesbrough on 56, Burnley on 55 now, and Brighton on 53. Even Derby and Sheffield Wednesday are on 51 and 50, so that's brought the top of the table right back into contention. The other big result is Bolton beating Rotherham 2-1 at the foot of the table. And that backs up something that I've been starting to think over the past couple of weeks, that I actually think that Charlton may surprisingly finish bottom, and I think Bolton will still go down. But unless they get their points deduction, I start to feel, now that they've got a couple of results under them, that they might not finish bottom, which I think even that would be a big achievement considering how poorly their season's gone so far.
Yeah, big result there for Bolton, and they seem to be, 3 games unbeaten now. They seem to be sort of getting together as a group and just trying to find the light at the end of the tunnel, and good for them given their financial situation. Simon, what's your thoughts on the Championship race this season, particularly for those clubs in and around the playoffs and the top 2 slots? Having sort of covered a couple of the teams that went up to the Premier League this year, who do you think is well set for a promotion push, and indeed who do you think is well set to survive if they were to come up?
I think it's a very, very bizarre league, I think, the Championship. I mean, before it started the season, I think many people had Middlesbrough as the favourite, simply obviously often the case, the team that loses in the playoff final you suspect will go up by deduction of them being the next best team, and I still think Middlesbrough will go up automatically. I mean, if they can get Jordan Rhodes firing, they'd gone on a fantastic run where they'd won 5 on the spin, and then they've not won for 3 games. So, which is typical of the Championship, really. You know, anyone could beat anyone. Hull, I think, have got a good squad, very good manager in Steve Bruce. I think they'd be suited, and Burnley with Sean Dyche, I think, again, he's a very good manager. You know, they consolidated when they went down, spent some money on Andre Gray, which seems to have been a good investment. Those would be the 3 that I think will go up. But the one that I would look out for, certainly in the playoffs, is the form at the moment, Sheffield Wednesday, who've really seemed to come together. And I mean, we saw them when they played Arsenal. They did look like a good side, and they're unbeaten in 6 now in the league. And if they can keep that going, I mean, Brighton have turned it around again when they looked fantastic. And then they went that bad run. They seem to have come back. Derby, we know, have got a lot of money and they've invested, and Paul Clement's doing a good job there. So I think the playoffs will be very, very tight to get into. But I would suspect that if I was going to have to pick 3 teams to come up and perhaps do okay, I would say Hull, Middlesbrough and Burnley. And certainly for Middlesbrough, I mean, I know you guys are big fans of sort of Hipsters and the 90s and stuff. I mean, they were a great, the likes of Juninho and Ravanelli, they were a great side back then. And I think it would be good to see them back in the Premier League, personally.
Yeah, it'd be just need to fill that stadium. That's the other thing. I would look at Middlesbrough and I think, Christ, they just never fill that stadium. It's a shame, but then it is difficult nowadays, particularly with the prices that we've mentioned before. Keep your eye, as you rightly say, Simon. There for me, Sheffield Wednesday. Seems to be no sign of stopping them at the moment, and they've got some really, really good players down there. And having Gary Hooper on a permanent deal and Aidan McGeady as a loan signing, it could just be enough to get them. I might even back them to go up automatically. We shall see.
I mean, they're only 6 points off it, aren't they? So,
yeah, exactly. And a couple of wins away, and all of a sudden they're right up there. And their next fixture, looking at the fixtures here, they're at home to Brentford, who are sort of on the slide as well in 12th place now. So, another victory, and who knows where the season could take them.
Got Hull before the end of the month as well, and that's a huge game.
It's a massive game, isn't it? Yeah, some really big fixtures. It's one of those leagues, actually. There always seems to be at least 2 or 3 big games every weekend.
That's why easily my favourite league in the world, personally.
Definitely close. We'll keep an eye on it, as we always do with all the other leagues. We should just quickly rattle through the before we leave. I should have done this previously. Before we leave the Premier League, we should just rattle through the next lot of fixtures, which we'll cover, of course, next week. Sunderland Manchester United is the early game on the Saturday, followed by the 3:00 Swansea Southampton, Bournemouth Stoke, Crystal Palace Watford, Everton West Brom, Norwich West Ham. And the evening game is Chelsea Newcastle, and then on the Sunday you've got a triple header. Sky will be loving this. You've got Arsenal and Leicester, which is a massive game at the top at 12:00, followed by Aston Villa Liverpool, followed by Manchester City Spurs, which you'd have to say now is also a massive game. So Valentine's Day, if you've got a partner, unlucky. You might have to make some kind of excuse about being ill to get the telly on that day. So good luck with that one. Right, let's finish with 3 questions then that we've had from our listeners tonight. As usual, if you've got any questions for this pod, ping them across to us on a Sunday evening and we'll do our best to get them answered. The 3 people that have tweeted us this week, we've got Czech, who's at Checky Nando's Lad, and he wants to know, and I'll give this one to Simon, is there another team next season going to do a Leicester?
I mean, it's a difficult question, really, isn't it? I think we were chatting about this off air and saying how the Premier League is almost in a state of flux this year with Pellegrini going, Manchester United not being very well, Liverpool taking time to adapt to Jurgen Klopp coming in, Chelsea sacking Mourinho, that this is almost the perfect storm for a team to go and have a go at it. By all means, I think Leicester doing this will encourage so many teams to think, you know what, we can afford to keep our players now with the TV money, we can afford to put on big wages, let's have a go at it. And if we start the season well, you never know, you can go on it. I mean, depending on if they keep their squad together, I think Everton have got the players to be up there fighting for it. I think West Ham in a new stadium, if they go and spend again, can try and break into that top 4. And I think what it does really is it gives all those clubs, you know, the inspiration to think, you know, it is possible we don't have to sell our best players, we can keep them together and we can have a crack at this league. So if I was going to pick one team who I think could you know, aspire to what Leicester have done and have a go at it, I would probably say Everton, but that'll depend on keeping their players together, which, in my personal view, I don't think they'll be able to keep that squad together, sadly. No, I agree with you. There.
This one I'll give to Ross, and then I'll get both your thoughts on the final question. So, Ross, this one comes from Czecholic at Czecholic. He wants to know, what 3 teams would you like to see relegated from the Premier League and 3 to come up from the Championship? So, I'm gonna get you to answer this in 2 ways. You can have 3 realistic teams. You can't obviously pick Man United, Arsenal, and Chelsea. You can have 3 realistic teams that you'd actually like to see relegated and be mean, and you can have 3 that you would like to see come up, and then I want you to give me the 3 you think will go down and the 3 you think will come up. So we'll start with the ones that you'd like to see go on and up.
I don't like this game. The ones I would like to see go down, for their benefit, Aston Villa. I think they really do need a good relegation at this point. I'd also like to see Newcastle go down because I think they need to do much like Villa. They need to clear the decks and get things sorted. Aside from that, I mean, the only team in football that I really dislike are West Ham. So out of sheer attitude, I might say West Ham, but there's no realistic way they're going down.
Like that. And 3 you'd like to come up?
The 3 I would ideally pick from the Championship are actually in 6th, 7th and 8th at the moment. Birmingham, because they are such a very nice team and Gary Rowett's a very good up-and-coming manager. Ipswich, because I love the way they've done their business. They're fighting at the right end of the table on almost £100,000, I believe, was the budget they'd spent on the team that was in the playoffs last season. And Sheffield Wednesday, because I think everyone realises that they're becoming a very, very good team very quickly. Good English core, good young manager as well. So, yeah, Sheffield Wednesday, Ipswich and Birmingham would be my ideal 3.
Yeah, fair enough. And give us the 3 teams that you do see going down and 3 teams that you do see coming up.
The 3 I do see going down are Norwich, Sunderland and Villa. I don't think that will change too much. It will just be a matter of who finishes bottom for me. And the 3 that I think will go up... This is the tricky one for me. Hull and Borough, I think, are probably nailed on. And then, I mean, the other one is completely open at this stage, but if I had to pick one, I would probably say Burnley.
Nice. Any difference in those, Simon? Particularly going down? Do you think anybody else is going to be sucked in?
I mean, I think Norwich and Villa, I think, are the ones that everyone seems to think are the certs, and then it's one from probably Sunderland or Swansea. I think Newcastle have enough to get out of it. I think Bournemouth have got enough to get out of it, and it's difficult. I think before Swansea got in Guilin and they had Curtis like Ross, I thought they'd go down, but I think Sunderland will get out of it, and I think Swansea will go down just because I think Allardyce is good enough to get them out of it. I also very much like the I think is it Kazri, the new guy they got in.
Yes.
Looks like his assist for the goal was very nice, and I was chatting to someone who knows French football like yourself, and they described him as a poor man's Payet. That might be a bit harsh, but
no, that's very accurate.
But,
very accurate. Yeah.
Hopefully, he can make a difference. He looks a good player anyway. I like the look of him. So, and that is desperately what Sunderland need if anyone's been watching them for the past few years, devoid of any creativity. So.
Yeah, you've got a goal scorer in Defoe. You need to use somebody
Exactly,
to find him in those positions. Yeah, and also a shout out for Lamine Kone, who I know Simon, me and you discussed when he went to Sunderland from my beloved Lorient, and already looks the part. Definitely an upgrade on the likes of Kabul and
Kirkhoff.
John O'Shea and Kirkhoff and Wes Brown and all the others. I think Kone, while granted he's not the most technically brilliant player in the world, he's big, he's strong, he's good in the air, he's an organiser, and I think he'll do well at Sunderland. So my only X factor on that one is I've got a feeling West Brom. I've got a feeling Mr. Pulis might have to surrender that record of never being relegated.
Well, Allardyce has never been relegated as well, so.
That's a good point. Good point. Yeah, I think Sunderland will be all right. I can't just write off Villa just yet. Maybe that's my heart over my head, because my head says they're terrible, but just my love for Remy Gard just will not phase. So hopefully he stays up, but I don't think it's going to happen. Final question then, before we address a bit of homework that we got sent last week. It comes from Pigman J. Hankenstein, who is fast becoming my favourite tweeter. Another good question from him this week. In your opinion, who has the more talented squad currently, Everton or Liverpool? Now, to split this question in two for the benefit of time, Simon, I'm going to give you the case for Everton, and Ross, I'm going to give you the case for Liverpool. Ross, you kick us off.
Well, I suppose for Liverpool, you'd have to argue Coutinho is probably the best out of both of the squads, frankly. Henderson is a very good midfielder. Sturridge, when he can actually play and gets on a decent run. Chan, I rate very highly as well. I can't think of any centre-backs or goalkeepers especially that spring to mind. I think Everton have the best there. I'm not really doing a good case for Liverpool here. Yeah, I mean, it's tricky because this has been such a crazy season for them. They've had so many injuries, it's difficult to know who's still a very good player and who's capable of turning up on any given day. They do have some very, very good quality players, and Coutinho is probably the best of both squads. But yeah, I find it a bit tricky with Liverpool trying to justify them against Everton at the moment.
Yeah, fair point. I struggled as well. Who do you think you can put forward for the case for Everton?
I mean, I think it is pretty close. I mean, they're both good squads and both have their merits. But I mean, when I look at Everton, I think I'd rather have their full-backs. I'd certainly rather have John Stones out the centre-backs. I mean, the goalkeepers is a flip of a coin. They're both pretty terrible. In terms of midfielders, you'd want Barkley in there. You'd want Deulofeu in there. You'd probably James McCarthy, not much in it between the likes of Henderson and Joe Allen. And up front, I think Lukaku would shade it over Benteke. So, I mean, Everton, I think Everton probably have the better starting 11, but in terms of squad depth, maybe Liverpool have got a better 25, but not much in it, I think.
Yep. So what we're basically saying there to answer that question is that none of us are really convinced by either, and we'd probably have a mesh of the two.
And we haven't answered your question.
And we haven't answered your question, yes.
Put Klopp in charge of Everton. I'd pick Everton every day of the week.
Oh, there we go. The Klopp appreciation side is out in force. But
that's just
no,
me
I think
not
if
rating Martinez at Everton. That's all.
No, that's fair. I think if you could mesh the two sides, you'd have a fairly good title challenging side. But that's easier said than done. Right, that's all the questions then. Thank you very much to those gentlemen who pinged those across to us. Much appreciated as always. Now, before we leave you, we were set a challenge last week, and even though he wasn't on, Simon stepped up to do this as well, which is even better. And the challenge was to pick. I'm going to have to find who tweeted us this now because I can't remember for love nor money, but it was to pick a team, sort of an all-star Premier League team, excluding Arsenal, Chelsea, Manchester City, Manchester United players. Now, I think the person who asked us to do this actually said, could we do it of all time? But I said that was just going to be an absolute impossibility. So I've asked our pundits to do it as far as this season goes. And the question was from @clockend_lad, by the way. So thank God I found who it was. So, Simon, do you want to kick us off? So this is your team, excluding, quote-unquote, the big four of this season.
Yeah, I mean, I almost just picked the Leicester team, but I did deviate slightly from it just for argument's sake. So, I mean, I went for Butland in goal. I think he's had a fantastic season. Neom of Watford at right back, who, again, I think quite underrated, actually. You know, he's done very well there. Left back went for Fuchs at Leicester, who's been amazing. I mean, the fact they got him on a free is incredible. I've not seen much of him play before, but speaking to some of your guys who follow German football closely, they weren't surprised at how well he's doing. Huth and Morgan at centre backs, been up there with the best pairings in the league. I mean, close to Alderweireld and Vertonghen. And then the midfield, slightly cheated by putting Payet on the right, Mahrez on the left, and then Kante and Wijnaldum in the centre midfield, which would perhaps be the paciest and strongest centre mid in the league if they ever played together. And then up front, just had to go for Vardy, obviously, top scorer in the league, and then Ighalo, who's jumped up from the Championship and made it look relatively easy for them. So that's who I've gone for. I think I'll probably now hear Ross's and realise I've missed about 4 players, but I would be quite happy if I was managing that team, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a good side. There's not too many I disagree with there, if any. Ross, who would you go for? In your
I
team?
would say that Simon and I have got quite a few doubles here. Mine isn't too far removed. I've also gone for Butland in goal. My back line is again Neom and Alderweireld from Tottenham, Morgan from Leicester. I've gone for Charlie Daniels at left back from Bournemouth. I think he's been absolutely fantastic this season. My midfield is a 5-man midfield with Kante and Noble from West Ham. Coutinho, Payet and Deulofeu are the ones I've gone for behind the striker. Wasn't sure on Deulofeu. I feel like there's another player that should be getting his position, but I've gone for Deulofeu nonetheless. And then my striker I had a real trouble with because I much prefer, personally, Ighalo to Vardy, but I've gone for Vardy as my solo striker because of that amazing goal-scoring record he went on and the fact he is generally kept them in it. And I've just realised it's Mahrez I'm thinking of that should have been in there for Deulofeu, but there you go, I went for Deulofeu.
Yeah. You have the right to change up to 24 hours, so you can.
Well, I'm going to change now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're both very, very good sides, and if any of you listening in want to send us your sides, or if you think there should be players that we should have had in there, then send us your thoughts, because it's tough, isn't it? I know I try and do Team of the Week every week, and I'm trying to pick teams from the top 4 leagues in Europe, and it's nigh on impossible to get every player that you want in. Or you have a week where everyone's pretty terrible and you just think, Christ, I just have to pick somebody. So it's tough.
Dele Alli
very, very tough.
I think that's maybe harshest one, I think.
Yeah, it's probably a fair shout. It's difficult to sum up because who's good right now and who's been good over a season as well. It's very, very tough. But good, I like it. Thank you for your homework there, gentlemen. Thank you for the question as well. Right, and that's pretty much it from us. Just a couple of small pieces of housekeeping. The last breakfast show we did last week, you might have noticed from our Twitter feed, or indeed if you're a YouTube listener, which I know a lot of our listeners are, we've been having a little bit of an issue with the good folk at Apple/YouTube. And they decided to keep taking down our last episode. We don't know why. We've tried to upload it several times and it keeps getting taken down. So hopefully, fingers crossed, this episode will reach your ears comfortably. I know iTunes is fine, so if you are an iTunes subscriber you should be fine. If you're not, maybe that's a way forward. And if you do have any trouble with YouTube, please visit our website. This episode will be posted on the website as well, and there's a direct player link on the website for you to listen directly, and I think you can also get us via the Stitcher app as well. So thank you to everyone that's contributed to our poll, because we were interested in finding out how you listen to us. We're looking to try and make some changes for the better so that everyone can tune in on a regular basis. So thank you for your feedback on that one. So hopefully, fingers crossed, all is well. But the only other announcement is that we will be changing, sad sigh, we will be taking away our theme music of the Mighty Metallica, mainly because we're concerned that we might get more episodes taken down with copyright issues. So we've decided to create a copyrightless theme, which I'm in the process of getting together now. So you might hear a couple of different themes for the next couple of weeks or the next couple of episodes until we get the final episode theme done. But when it's up, hopefully everyone will enjoy it. So there you go. There's some breaking news for you. And other than that, we will return for the usual Hipsters pod tomorrow. I have John, Tom and Drew with me as usual. We'll be going through the French, Spanish, German and Italian leagues as we always do. We'll be taking your questions, team of the week and a Hipsters choice, all the good stuff. And also Drew's Hall of Fame blog will return this Friday. We didn't put one out this week due to the fact we had all these issues with YouTube. It took up a lot of our time, so apologies for that, but it will return on Friday. So that's everything. Thank you very much to both Simon and to Ross. Thank you very much for your time, sirs.
Thanks for having me.
Yep, always a pleasure.
Absolutely, you will indeed both return in the coming weeks, I'm sure. And yes, all that remains for me to be said is thank you as always for tuning in to the podcast. Do give us a like and a comment on YouTube. Do give us an iTunes review if you get 5 minutes. And as we always say, keep your beard strong and your glasses trendy. And we will speak to you very soon.